Welcome back to the Rise with Anita podcast, or welcome if you're new here. So, today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to because we're diving into something that I know many women quietly wrestle with: feeling like they have to earn love. Whether that shows up through people pleasing, overgiving, shrinking themselves, or believing that if they can just be enough for someone else, they'll finally feel like they're chosen. Today's guest is Ryan Spence. Ryan is a somatic relationship coach who helps women heal anxious attachment, release people pleasing patterns, and build relationships from a place of security instead of survival. And what I appreciate about Ryan's work is that while he teaches relationships, what he's really inviting people back to is themselves. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. I'm so honored to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, before we jump into today's conversation, I'd love to take a moment for us to arrive together. You and I are both big on doing the breath. So, for those of you listening, if you're able to do so and you're not driving, go ahead and feel your feet on the ground, soften your shoulders. And I want you to just, as you breathe, notice where in your life are you still trying to prove your worth instead of allowing yourself to receive the love that is available for you. And together we're going to take a slow inhale through the nose for 4. We're going to hold for 4, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to gently exhale through the mouth for 6. One more time, inhaling through the nose for 4, holding for 4, and slowly release. And when you're ready, feel free to be back into the room, and let's begin. So, I always start off the podcast with a simple question before we dive into your work and just all things about your journey. But in this current moment, what is bringing you joy in this season?
And what's bringing me joy in this season is, allowing myself to rest this summer. I've definitely been the type to overwork and try to be productive, always finding something. What can I do to be busy, to grow the business, to grow my impact, generate more revenue, all those things that all of us solo entrepreneurs and coaches often fall into. And I've really been able to practice that inner safety to okay, I've done plenty, and that I get to rest, and I don't need to earn it. I don't need to do so much to get there. So just allowing myself to rest, enjoy the summer, and get ready for a trip to New York City and a trip to Italy that I've been really wanting to get back to the last couple of years.
Beautiful answer. I want to take a moment just to ask, because it is interesting that you brought up the tendency to overwork. How uncomfortable is it for you as a business owner to actually allow yourself to take the pause and create that space?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, so I've had my business for about 5 to 6 years, and it's been pretty uncomfortable until finally in this last few months. And it's been through the integration and all the somatic work over time to slow down. So it's finally getting to a place that it feels really right. And especially getting the validation that once I've slowed down these last several weeks, months, that actually magical things have happened. And it goes to that esoteric spiritual concept that I've heard so many times of, if you're constantly doing, you can't receive from the universe or from others, right? And so it's been really beautiful to get to finally see that wisdom. Okay, if I rest, showing the universe, I don't have to always earn more money, earn more respect, earn more love, whatever, kind of on the theme of what you introed with. These things will naturally come to me effortlessly.
Beautiful answer. So, for someone who's never heard of you before and doesn't know your story, who was Ryan before your healing journey? You had a career, the home, the appearance of success, but what was actually happening inside on
Yeah.
the internal spectrum?
Yeah, a lot of insecurity, a lot of mental analysis paralysis, trying to figure out what do I need to do to get this client to, hire me, or what do I need to do to earn this love from this woman, right, to feel happy and secure. So that was a good, some sort of thing of like, what am I doing wrong, or what do I need to do, or who do I need to be, or what is the right thing to say in order to attract whatever it is I want, a friend, a romantic partner, a client. And that's been such a parallel. And so as I've allowed myself to really finally be in authenticity and safe in authenticity through a lot of this somatic work that I've experienced myself before doing it, that I'm able to feel safe in my authenticity.
Beautiful answer. So walk us back though, because you had a pretty successful career, very different from what you're doing now. It's almost like the way I would position it is like myself, you went from a highly analytical space to
Hmm.
something that's a little more fluid. And
Yeah.
so walk us back. What was that space for you for the listeners who are unfamiliar? And then also, what was that yearning, that calling to really, how did you know that it was time for you to make that leap?
Oh, love this question. Yeah, so a little background. I worked in the finance industry, or the banking industry, banking slash mortgage industry, uh, big Fortune 500 company. Worked there for about 18 years. So much of my identity was with how intelligent I am and how structured I am, how responsible I am. And yeah, there was always this inkling in the back of my mind of like, I really don't feel fulfilled in this job, but it pays really great, and I'm allowed to have, a really nice material life thanks to it. But there was always a part of me that's been very empathic and very caring and wanting to make an impact. So much so that I almost wanted to go get a second master's degree like 10 years ago to become a social worker. I bailed on that at that point, but that was probably a little bit the start of like, maybe there is something around healing and helping other people in my life. Fast forward to 2019, I had a devastating heartbreak that really shifted my life and really told me like I need to do things differently. I've definitely been playing small when it comes to romance and relationship, showing up as people pleasing, showing up as a doormat to women. Again, thinking that like I need to be a certain way to earn love to then be happy, type of thing. So after that happened, that was really like I call my dark night of the soul. That shifted things in dating, but that also just gave me the courage to do a couple different things. One, move cities. So I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa, and now live in Minneapolis. And that was really scary. I'm 42. I lived the first 36 years of my life in Des Moines. And, you know, I had no idea, like, would I like living in a different city? I got to make new friends. Wow, Minneapolis is so much more expensive, et cetera. So that, making that big change gave me the courage that, continue to build up. I can do hard things. I can do unique, scary things. And then later throughout, I'm having this dark night of the soul, which is coming into like the spiritual awakening, learning about Reiki, manifestation, all these esoteric things that, of course, most of us don't learn in the corporate space or in school. And then come late 2019, or excuse me, 2021, I find out I'm a human design manifester, which is, a powerful human design type, and all these different esoteric astrology things. Plus, I've always had the vision of myself being on stage and supporting people, and it just made so much sense. So I needed the evidence over and over and over and over again, and the pain in my body and the pain in my soul of like, oh, I'm really kind of miserable doing this corporate job. And so eventually, towards the end of 2021, with all those things, I did the really anti-finance person thing and told my manager, like, so that I had that going against me too, is like, I'm a finance person, so extra financially responsible. And I told my manager, even with maybe like one client at that time, as I was still just building up my business, with one client at that time, I'm like, yeah, go ahead and lay me off whenever you guys do layoffs. I mean, I kind of knew something was going to happen. A big company that's, doing a really teaching position. They're often people that get laid off anyways. And I was really holding on to being with this company because I'm like, I'd rather get laid off because I put so much time in here. I want to get that severance package. And so 6 months later, April 2022, so over 4 years ago, I got that 10-month severance package. That was just such a dream that also happened just a few days before I went to my magical trip to Italy. So there was, and I just found out about it. So there was so much
Oh,
magic.
goodness.
It was very divine. But yeah, it was really just this culmination of all these things. It took a couple years of courage and the pain in my soul to really like, okay, let's try this. Let's do this. I trust myself to find another job if this doesn't work out.
Beautiful. What was the threshold for you though? So you were feeling the pain in your soul and in your body, but can you walk us through what that actually looked like on a day to day and what you were maybe doing to cope with it at the time? Because a lot of times people tend to have a little bit of like distraction that they're trying to hide from.
Yeah, I think the distraction for me was for several years, I mean, even 5 or 6 years before leaving my company, I was applying to other companies. I was applying to companies that would be dream companies, applying for jobs that I was overqualified for. And there was still like, this does not make sense. I'm not getting interviews or I'm not getting the job type of thing. So there was the thought of like, I'm going to keep trying the logical thing and try to see if just being with a different company will be better. But that wasn't working out. So it just, between that just not working out and then, my job started to become a little bit more painful in the work. I wasn't enjoying the work that I was doing like I had enjoyed the prior years. And by all means, I actually had a great boss, a great job, great money, did not really have to work that much, but things were starting to shift in my day-to-day job to where it was like, I'm not digging this. So I'd say really somatically, it was just kind of feeling a little bit more misery, a little bit more pain in the job and really not seeing much hope in sight. And so it really just kind of seemed like the path of least resistance, honestly, was going to be just getting let go and trying this out and just separating from my current job.
Beautiful. I'm curious. So you left when you only had one client or about.
Yeah.
What was it that finally was like, okay, I'm going to bet on myself? And then obviously you said, if this doesn't work out, okay, I'll go back to working corporate, I'll go back to finance. It's my little safe hub. But what was your thought process while you were making that shift that was like, okay, I'm going to jump and I'm going to go all in and just see what happens? And obviously you had the comfort of your severance package, but realistically, it doesn't matter if you have that severance coming. A lot of people will still feel that when you're moving from a corporate job to a portion where you're actually like, now I get to do everything.
Hmm.
It can be very daunting for someone who hasn't experienced it yet.
Yeah, the parts with that of, I mean, with only having one client, again, it was like that's counterintuitive again to a financially responsible person. And I also had some savings too because I've done well with owning a home before, so I had a lot of savings. I had, the severance package coming if they did lay me off, but I didn't know that was a given when I made the declaration to my manager. But yeah, it was really just all, I teach archetypes and my archetype is like the analyzer type. So like data really helps me feel safe. And so just hearing the proof over and over and over through like human design, gene keys and astrology and numerology and how I feel about myself and just the training that I had been doing, there was just a lot of evidence there that really helped
Support it.
trust the process of life. And that's really a lot of what I was learning in 2020 and 2021 is a lot of people were having spiritual awakenings and like, okay, there's some element of trust in life because logically I should be able to get these other jobs and that's not happening. And I knew I had been really stuck in this place for several years of not enjoying or just not, I should say not enjoying my job, but just feeling that like deep sink in my soul. And so I just knew something had to change.
Beautiful answer. So I'm curious for those of you who are listening, I want to just take a moment because we're going to get into some of my favorite parts of our so far conversation, which is before we get into how you transformed your relationship with women and all the aspects of what had to shift in you, you first transformed your body. So you went through a 130-pound weight loss journey, which is no small feat at all. So I want to ask, because of being someone who has lost a significant amount of weight, I understand the nuance of like what it takes and how that shifts a person in the identity form as well. What was the identity, firstly, that led you to that gain? And then from there, I would like you to touch on what was the deciding factor to change.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question. Well, the identity of the person with the weight gain was, yeah, I grew up overweight too, so it was the boy with the mom wound, the boy that felt inadequate, and so very unconscious in the boy that didn't know how to process his emotions and be present with his body and what he needs, and the one that felt really lonely a good portion of life and felt like there was something wrong with my social skills with friends. I mean, I had some friends, but there was still a belief that um, I wasn't a good enough friend, or I was too much at times and stuff like that. So that was a lot of the identity, and so food was my my comfort zone, so to speak, and there was just a complicated relationship around food growing up. So going to food to yeah, soothe my painful emotions that I didn't know how to process was the identity before. And then getting into right after kind of that last semester of college, so this would have been around 2005, 2006. That was when I started to lose weight, and it sounds kind of almost wrong because losing weight was such a struggle and something I couldn't really figure out before. But I actually lost 20 pounds really by accident, so to speak. And what that really was it was my last semester of college, and I was going out and partying a lot less. I was binge drinking a lot less. I was taking a little bit better care of my body, just in terms of like, I mean, this is going to sound really funny. My secret was actually playing more video games, which you don't usually think of video games and weight loss, but because like staying home and playing video games and being a little bit more low key compared to going out to the bars and eating pizza and gorging yourself on food was a better habit. I had lost like 20 pounds in that last semester of college, and I was like, this, what? And so I was really like kind of astounded from that. So I was really blessed in that experience happening. And, I deduced from that from that experience that like, wow, this wasn't miserable. This wasn't like painful like we think weight loss needs to be. I really deduced that like, okay, so this must be like this idea of slow habit change over time. And so from there, I really created my own system that, just changing a couple habits per month over time. And when I was seeing the validation that I was losing the weight, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually working. This is going to work. And then it just helped me become more and more excited and confident that it was going to happen.
Beautiful answer. So, what would you say is the biggest shift in identity now versus that version of you that had gained? Obviously, you have tools, but I mean more so from the aspect of like how you see yourself.
Well, it was very interesting. I mean, I would say, so that was between about 22 and 26. And again, I'm 42 right now. So when I was losing the weight, the identity at that time was, the shift of identity was before I thought, well, women don't like me because I'm too fat and ugly, was, before the weight loss. And after the weight loss, it's like, oh, well, maybe women will like me now. Maybe I'm worthy of love. And that's when I really actually started my dating journey around then. So I would say that's the biggest identity shift really that happened at that time. And then as far as today, there's been a lot more that's shifted in that reality too, around like, this is just me taking care of myself, and, my weight, how I look isn't conditional on, the love that I get to receive.
Beautiful answer. I'm curious just because I know, having been on the other side of it as a female, when you started to lose the weight and you said that you started to take off into the dating world, did you start to feel more confident in approaching women? Was it a factor for you? Did you notice that women were treating you differently after the fact?
Yeah, I would say what what was changed is, I mean, I got compliments from friends that knew me before, but it was more like friend compliments, like, wow, you look great, in terms of like you've lost a lot of weight because you were, pretty big before, type of thing. but I didn't really take that as like, oh, all of a sudden they're attracted to me. I would say I don't know that I recall women saying like, oh, I find, in the subtle hints of like, I find you more attractive now necessarily. But to your point around, do I feel more confident? Sort of. I mean, I didn't feel like the weight was part of the issue, but there was still a heavy social awkwardness and a fear of like, how do I ask a woman out? And just being really nervous to ask a woman out. And so what served me in that time of doing the dating was the fact that dating websites like Match.com, OkCupid, eHarmony were really kind of evolving then, which was perfect for a computer nerd like me. Like, great, I get to go kind of meet somebody, assess whether I'm interested in them, and then be behind a screen to ask them out and get to in-person scenario where there was more social awkwardness and nervousness to work through over the 100 plus first dates that I went on over the course of the next 10 years.
Wow. Well, thank you for your vulnerability because that's something. I was actually about to ask, well, how did you start dating? Because we have such nuance as time has gone. Like I think back to when my parents found each other, and it was literally just through coincidence they happened to meet at a work situation. Not that they were working together, but it was just through like community essentially. And now it's evolved to dating apps and swiping left and right. So it's interesting that you were very comfortable with the fact that, okay, I can start approaching women with the internet versus in person. And that felt like a safe form for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a safer form, and and it made sense. Again, data person, right? So I can get all the data on them, and being a guy, being maybe a little bit more shallow to physical appearances too. You can kind of tell, like, oh, I feel attracted to this person. It felt less risky, also, right? Because there's, of course, like many of us having a fear of turning somebody down that maybe is interested in you, but maybe you don't feel the attraction. So, yeah, the timing of those sites were really perfect, at least kind of get a start and get me out onto dates, and then, go through the mess of trying to figure out how dating works in your mid 20s when, really you don't really learn about how to date.
No.
At least I didn't. And I think most people do in high school or college.
Now I can relate. Dating, finances, different components of these like actual life skills were not really talked about. I mean, I have a very luckily open relationship with my mom, and she was kind of cracking down, but the way she was raised and what we had traditionally, it was like, you don't talk about that. And it used to be this question where I would then pose it to like my grandparents of like, why don't we talk about it though? Because how am I supposed to experience and know what to do in that scenario if we're not talking about it? So it's just very interesting to see that dimension. Speaking of which, I'm just curious now, because we have touched on dating. Have you gotten more comfortable actually approaching a woman that you like now in person, or is that still something that you might feel hesitant to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's been one of my biggest journeys over, the last 16 years. And it wasn't until I started to do a lot of retreats around somatic releases, around relationships, sexuality, intimacy, consent and boundaries. Like once I started to attend those retreats and to when I could start to and get practice in those, in those retreats and other types of events where with practicing that over time, that's what's helped me feel safe in my body, right? And so, a lot of what I still would work through would be like that fear of rejection, or this fear that I'm being too much, or this fear that my desires are too much, right? And, it comes from a lot of conditioning too, of like from the 90s of like, oh, men are just pigs, all they want is sex. And so thinking like, oh, well, I guess if I'm a man and I'm attracted to somebody, or I'm physically desiring somebody, there's something wrong with me, or I need to hide that, which is not the case. And so, again, through like a lot of, some teachings around those pieces, which now I teach about because like how valuable would it have been for us to learn about this in high school, college, in our 20s about how to date consensually, how to escalate things physically in a, conscious way, how to ask somebody out. And so there was a lot of me like really healing, because again, what was showing up before doing a lot of this really deep work the last 6 or so years was, the needy man, which is a very common in our society. I know there's plenty of complaints about men being very needy, men being kind of more in their passive and then in their feminine more. And so subconsciously, that's where I was at. I was the nice guy. I had the covert desires. I might like somebody, but thinking in my head, well, I can't ask them out, so maybe I have to like ask them about something different to try to like hope that something could work out, instead of just having like a direct, conscious, like grounded request. And so that's been a lot of the practice and healing that I've done for myself the last several years. So short story long is feeling much more confident in that realm.
Beautiful. I have a lot that I could literally pick up from that.
Please, yeah.
But I want you to firstly dive into what the needy man archetype really looked like for you. And then from there, I would like us to go into the archetype of just that need for like finding the I want to be enough to even approach a person and what had to shift really.
Well, I kind of want to answer that last question first, because before I forget that, it's a beautiful question. I mean, ultimately, it is inner security in myself that I'm whole and worthy and valuable, unconditionally, as we all are. But yeah, so the feeling the self-value that I don't, and trusting in abundance of, women in the world, that I don't need to be a certain type of way to earn love from somebody that I want, to be in relationship with. So I'd say, wholeness and feeling that self-worth and self-value for that piece. To get to your first part of your question was around like, what was that needy archetype? As I reflect on it, it was very much like trying to validate my own worth and say how attractive the woman was that maybe I slept with or that I was dating. And, it was very transactionally minded, right? I think I grew up thinking that love was transactional too. And so it couldn't help but think about like, it feels almost icky to say, but I mean, was the truth of it. Like, okay, how attractive are they? Are they like an 8 out of 10? And like, but subconsciously, like, that's what it was I was like, okay, well, maybe I am becoming a more valuable man because this woman that's an 8 out of 10, likes me. And then like, maybe I do have some value. Maybe I'm an 8 out of 10 too, right? So literally, again, over intellectualizing it and transactional thinking. But yeah, the neediness was, needing some validation from women subconsciously. Really, it was the part that wanting a woman to support me emotionally, because I didn't feel like I got that growing up, just with the challenges that I had with my mom growing up. So, so that was a big part of it. And then, being insecure, being in the anxious attachment, so to speak, was a tie-in with it too. So if there was something, I'm sure there's plenty of people with the anxious attachment in this audience too, because I think we're, it's kind of a similar theme of, overproducing, overgiving, and all that. What is very much like I can be very attuned to somebody. Like that's one of our superpowers that we develop, is we can be really attuned to somebody. And with that, if anything was off, there was like, what did I do wrong, right? And so there was that belief that like, okay, did I say something that was wrong? And so it was just very hyper in my head, worrying about like just cross-analyzing myself, which is of course very exhausting. And so it was not a fun time. I'm grateful that I'm through that, but I'm also grateful for the lessons that I've gotten from that, so that I get to support people through that.
Beautiful answer. And now I just want to go back to the first part of your question answer, which was you said that you had to start feeling whole and recognizing your own wholeness. This has been a huge theme in my work, but I'm curious from your perspective, what did it take for you to finally start feeling that within yourself?
Yeah. Well, to feel it was actually like a lot of the nervous system resetting and releasing the old, grief and anger from childhood, just creating the space for the knowledge. And so the knowledge piece is more knowing than feeling, but yeah, hearing all the things throughout my spiritual journey, like, oh, we're all whole and worthy. And, if you're seeking something outside of yourself, it means it's missing within you. So you don't have all the knowledge. And that's where a lot of people in the personal growth space come to, is like, yeah, we got all this knowledge. Like, I know I should feel this way, but I don't. And so, like you beautifully asked in your question, how do you actually feel it and trust it, was having to feel the old wounding from childhood and feel the old rejections, and going to allow my body to open up, so that I like to call it like my nervous system going from the little kid nervous system that still has those old triggers to like, okay, now it's fully grown. It's in the adult nervous system that can take in all this wisdom and knowledge.
Beautiful. So I'm curious, just because this is like coming as a gut punch right now, but when you started to create that capacity, is the way I'll put it, what did you notice was the first thing that was shifting in your own life? And that could even be just how you were. So I don't want you to think necessarily like the mirror of what was reflecting, but like whatever comes through.
Yeah. I'd say for me, well, a physical thing that started to happen after releasing a lot of that was my acid reflux was going away. I sometimes had acid reflux in my body when I sleep. So I was like, oh, that's kind of curious, after I did retreats with lots of somatic releasing. Like, okay, that's interesting. So that's one like thing I could see in my system. I mean, I know I still even talk a little bit quick, but believe it or not, I probably talked 2-3 times the speed of this 6 years ago. So I was talking a little bit slower. I was feeling less anxious. And, I do
More
want to
grounded.
share. I know you said you didn't want to hear as much of a mirror, but the first thing that did come up was also getting that feedback and reflection from women. Like when I was starting to release that, I was showing up slower. I was showing up more grounded. Like I would ask a woman out, and even if she'd say no, she's like, I'm a no, but like I really appreciate that you were vulnerable to
Affectionate.
ask, and how grounded you were. So that outside feedback was really helpful, again, for a data person like me to see that, like, oh, it's not just my internal world.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting. I can relate on the talking quickly. I used to be frequently told that I needed to slow down because I could chatter on very quickly and it would be like a whole monologue. And so, because I sound like my mom on the phone, apparently, so we've been told, the people would be like, I need, Marina, wait, can you please just slow down and tell me what you're trying to say? And so I find the same thing. It's like you have more of a grounded energy once you start to do the work, but at first it's very innate. And it's interesting that you brought that up. So I just wanted to say I can totally relate.
Yeah. Well, I heard something the other day. One of my friends in this world reflected to me. It's like, yeah, intelligent people have a lot to say. So sometimes we want to get it out before people interrupt us too. So I'm choosing to believe that, there's also the element of sometimes it can be an anxious thing of getting it
Yeah.
all out. But also maybe we're not used to being heard too. And so we're trying to get out the things before we get interrupted, because, we don't always feel heard or
Safe.
seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me on my journey, I had a situation where I have this friendship that the person would actually listen and like wait until I was finished with my like sentence to talk. And I remember at one point going, okay, what is off about this? And it was just the reflection of like, oh no, I'm just giving you the space. But because I hadn't had that, I was very much like, oh, this feels very different. And it caused a lot of like me having to reflect back in and look at myself and look at relationships that I was a part of and how I've normalized that in my nervous system. And then had to work through like, what do you do when you actually do feel safe and like seen versus because I think also a lot of people don't talk about this, but the flip end, if you're not used to it and you haven't created that capacity yet, is you try to sabotage it because you don't know how to interact with that. So for me, I was like, how do I not totally screw this relationship up? Because I'm finding that like having that witness is very uncomfortable. So it was a very interesting little journey I went on.
Yeah, That's beautiful.
So I'm curious because a lot of women, especially, but you are proof, men too, feel the need to earn love. What does that actually mean to you, and how does that show up in your relationships?
Yeah, what that meant for me, and I mean, I didn't even know it until just the last few years. I've seen it over and over, but what it meant to me was like, who do I need to be? What do I need to do to be attuned to the other person's needs first?
Mm,
To yeah, make sure like, okay, can we have connection? Well, what do you need? What do you need? Right, that type of thing. And so it mostly showed up as like, say for example, if I was really interested in somebody, it would be very subconsciously covert, like, oh, can I support you? What do you need? Right. And so it'd almost be waiting until they had a problem, or trying to, be in that fixer role to like,
going the
oh,
extra
okay, yeah,
mile.
yeah, and trying to support. And it made sense. I mean, I think that's what I picked up growing up. And then, in middle school and high school, I was often showing up as, the nice guy that got friend zoned. And again, that was such a habit of, there was a woman that I liked, I became her friend, right? I was there, I was empathic, I was listening, I was caring, in being a good friend, but deep down underneath, like I really wanted something more romantically. And because I was in that, that friend zone, that, and not really speaking my desires, I was killing the polarity. And so that, still showing up in adulthood of where in my body, and I think I can even kind of think about it, it was kind of like around the solar plexus to the heart, is really thinking and being strategic in a way of like, okay, there's this woman, I have an attraction or I'm interested. How can I, what's my angle? And I know this sounds really manipulative, and it is, but it wasn't like from a negative way. It was just what I thought was like, what angle do I need to be, or who do I need to be, so that they have the best chance of success for a good conversation, and hopefully she'll like me, type of thing.
Wow. Well, I appreciate your vulnerability because that's interesting to think of how the male perspective works. Again, because I've said this before, but I don't coach men mostly from the fact that I do not understand the male brain. And I'm not going to try to. So while there are things obviously between men and women, and obviously you know this because you do coach women, but that are universal, I just never felt confident in being able to coach a guy, especially when it comes to like relationships and how he feels, because the thought process and the way that the male brain thinks and the way that a female brain thinks are very different.
Yeah, and I think there's really something to like a lot of the people that we support that are in people pleasing and overgiving, regardless of gender. I mean, I think I agree it's probably more women than men that maybe fall in that archetype or that tendency, but there's certainly men in that realm. And at least the way I like to think of it is, I mean, certainly there's gender differences and how we think about things. We have our own conditioning too, but I feel like the overgiving, the overproducing, the high achieving, the trying to earn love, I think in that own realm, we can share a lot of those same or similar types of thoughts and tendencies, regardless of gender.
Very true. Very true. So you've already defined what nice guy syndrome would be, but I am curious from your perspective, what really is the difference between being someone who's giving in a relationship, not overgiving, giving in a relationship, and abandoning themselves for the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful question, and I'd say the difference is, what does it feel like in your body, and what feels like your truth, and what do you really have capacity to give? Because by the nature of like what you just said, the question around over giving, it means we're giving over what we have available to give. And so, and usually the the pain point of over giving is our body or our self-esteem, right? And so, let's say I've only got like 3 hours of sleep, and I offer like, hey, Nita, I'm going to go help you move. And, let me go do this. Let me go pick a pizza. Let me go do all this stuff and start doing all these things. Like probably, especially since I'm not feeling really well, that there's probably an element where I'm like, hey, you know what? My body is probably like, you know what? Actually, I'm too tired today. I can't even help you with moving. Maybe I could help like bring pizza over for the other movers, so to speak. So just as an example of just thinking about like really tuning into my emotional body and my physical body of like, what am I really available to give from a place of not expecting something back? Because that's what really giving a gift is we're giving something and not expecting something transactionally back. So being attuned to that versus overgiving, right, is like we're not trusting our higher self, we're not listening to our body, we're giving usually from a place of fear, right, of like, oh, I feel like I need to give to Anita and help support her, otherwise we're not going to be friends anymore, or this thing type of thing. And so that's what the subconscious programming that causes us to overgive is like we're fearful of something else happening if we don't give as much as possible and override our nervous system.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge I love the fact that you brought the answer back to a tactical, how it feels in your body and in your emotions, because oftentimes I feel like most people think overgiving in terms of maybe like you're giving gifts or you're going out of your way to do something for someone, which you did touch on that, but like there's so many variations of it, and oftentimes we do forget like it comes down to, am I doing it from a place where, yeah, I've got the energy, I've got the sustenance, and I'm not making it. I love that you also said that it's not giving with an expectation, because for me, I don't think that any of the relationships that are really going to work in a long run is the relationships that you're keeping score. So if you're
So,
doing something in order for someone to do something back, or there's this like hidden expectation of like, if I do this for you, when time comes around, you're going to do this for me. That's a sure way to end up in disappointment. Not always, but I don't believe in tit for tat in relationships.
yeah. And yeah, it builds up a lot of resentment. And that was definitely how I was showing up too, again, and sometimes with dating and with women, right, was, not voicing exactly what I need, not thinking that I could, right? Was that even right as a man to do that with all the conditioning and all the beliefs from the 90s and 2000s and all that? Yeah, and so, yeah, to that point, it's recognizing that like we're responsible for our needs and wants, and we have to voice that because people aren't going to be mind readers. And if we're trying to do that through covert, like doing things like, oh, let me do this favor for you, Anita, so that you can have me on the podcast, right? If that's something that's going on in my head, right? Or whatever it is, it usually just doesn't work out, like you said.
No, it doesn't. Interesting perspective though, because I've literally, now that I think about it, I can definitely see how many relationships are tied to that whole aspect of the give to take ratio. And you're right, it builds up a lot of resentment and builds up this expectation and disappointment factor. So it's almost like the best way to step back from that is just to really have a check in with yourself of like, why am I even giving in the first place?
Yeah, well said. That's exactly where I would take my clients is, why are you giving, and what do you actually want to give, and what do you actually want to receive, and just being really authentic with those desires, and just holding those true, even if it's just within yourself. That you got it. That's the place to be.
Beautiful. So I'm curious, because you've done so much work on yourself, when did you finally feel safe enough to feel like you're authentically yourself?
Ooh, great question. I mean, I'd say it was probably not that long ago, like about a year ago. So as you mentioned, with all the work that I've done, I've been in a I mean, I've done like worked with therapists, I've worked with coaches. Those have all been good. I mean, more coaching than therapy on my side, and then several somatic retreats, like about 10 of them over the last 3 years. And then there was this one emotional intelligence leadership training that was really expansive for me. And we came up with three qualities that really were the things that were meant for me to step into in my leadership in life, or leadership and in life. And they were authentic, vulnerable, and loving. And so part of this is it's a really deep transformational program that we do 90 days of integration. And it was, we get lots of feedback back and forth. And it was really towards the end of that, so almost a year ago, where I really started to step into my authentic version of myself, my vulnerable part of myself, and my loving part of myself. Like a huge masculine heart, but it always felt like, oh, it's weird to be very loving, right? I am like the kind of guy that, I love my friends, especially my female friends. I'll give them a hug and a kiss on the cheek, right? And thinking that, okay, well, that's kind of weird. They're gonna get the wrong idea. But once I just started to feel safe in my body, that's how it was. It was just friendly and loving. And so I'd say it's been about a year when I've really been like, okay, this is who I am. And, to that degree, there's always a new level of learning more about myself and what's an even more authentic version of myself. But I'd say that probably about a year ago when I'm like, oh, wow, great. I can actually be my authentic self and be lovable and accepted by all the same friends that I care about.
Beautiful answer. I'm curious though, what was harder for you to lean into, the vulnerable or the loving?
I'd say probably the vulnerable. I mean, of the three, it was the authentic side. I think that was the hardest of the three. But of those two that you mentioned, maybe vulnerable, because there was still the mind going and being strategic. And again, what do I need to say to elicit the answer? Or what do I need to say to keep the peace? And really what needs to be said in a lot of the situations is being vulnerable, like sharing the vulnerable, authentic thing that needed to be said. So I'd say that more than the loving side.
Can you expand on the keeping of the peace? I'm just curious what that looked like in your perspective and your experience.
Well, I guess I'd say keeping the peace would be just being really hyper vigilant, hyper analytical on, I mean, my brain's a really high processing brain to where it would be like, okay, they're like very quick to where halfway before they even ask their full question, I can already know what their question's going to be. And I'm already like kind of playing like checkers of like thinking of the next couple of moves, which is very exhausting, by the way, but thinking of the next couple of moves, like, well, if I say this, I'll get this response. And that's probably going to be maybe the least amount of conflict, so to speak, even in situations where it might not elicit any conflict. So I think it was just so much programming from childhood, from the challenges that I had with friends in middle school, high school, that I became really good at being a quick-witted chameleon. Like I can say the right thing like kind of like a politician, like saying the right thing to the right people. And so that was what my experience was just quick-witting into that. And I think even though there probably wasn't going to be conflict, it was just, that was the habit, was to do that.
Well, you were looking to protect yourself. Even if there
Hmm.
was no conflict, you were at the root of that. You were just trying to protect yourself.
Right.
Wow, beautiful answer.
Yeah, thank you.
So, why do you think authenticity for you was so scary personally?
Yeah, I'd say probably because I had experiences, especially like I can think back to, growing up. I mean, I got bullied a little bit in elementary school, maybe middle school. There was periods of time, like I can remember times in middle school where, like in seventh grade, where, I had some friends, but there was just this one specific scenario in one of my classes where, none of my friends were in that class. And so, like having to sit at lunch with the sixth graders, which I don't know if you guys remember, like when you're in seventh grade and sitting with the sixth graders, like, oh my gosh, like, what is wrong with you? Or at least that was the story I had. And so I think just, in those formative years of assuming that like there must be something wrong with me because I'm not getting invited with the cool kids, or these people don't like me, or getting bullied. And so again, the brain kind of making up the story that there must be something wrong with me. So I think that the authenticity piece was difficult because, it was so formed at such a young age And, I know I was also very skilled at eliciting the response I wanted. So I went from, all that in middle school to almost becoming homecoming king my senior year and being friends with all the friends, like the skaters, the jocks, the nerds, the regular people, the preps, all those cliques from high school, right? I could fit in with everybody. And so there was always this, to that point, like a safety of being able to make everybody happy, be able to appeal to as many people as possible. And so that served me well, of course, in the corporate world of like moving up the ladder. And so there was just so much, I think, evidence and reward of not being your authentic self and just being who you think you need to be to make more money, move up the ladder, make more friends, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, beautiful answer. So, what did it feel like when you finally dropped the performance or the mask?
Oh, so freeing. I mean, it just has felt so good to drop those masks. And yeah, it's much less exhausting in the head, much less exhausting in the body. Yeah, much more free, much more light, much more happiness to just get to be who I am.
Beautiful. So, I'm curious, and we're almost coming up for time, but I want to hit this point very well. What is a pattern that you find that women typically, excuse me, see about themselves over and over? But it's not necessarily about dating, it's just the relationship that they actually have within themselves.
Yeah, that's a very profound question. I mean, so much of it I do see in dating. I mean, I think a big part of it is, yeah, with how women's appearances and how they look. I mean, that comes to mind a little bit. Another one that comes up too is, yeah, feeling like they need to take care of all the things. Especially I work with a lot of single mothers as well, so that's a common tendency is, maybe being overly in their masculine because again they're not trusting
Men.
any other masculine structures in their life, whether it's the man or things around them.
Yeah.
So there's this feeling of safety of controlling the situation, feeling like I have to be, the scheduler, I have to do all these things. So I think that's probably another big one that I see quite often.
Wow. So I'm curious in your perspective then, what actually helps them create the emotional safety that they need?
Yeah. What helps them create the emotional safety they need? Well, at least lots of validation for their feelings and how they feel. I mean, that's what we're trained as coaches is to hold space and, acknowledge what we hear and validate where they're at. Validate how their emotions are totally valid for their journey and meaning it authentically, of course. And especially in my experience being a male and working with females too, a good portion of the women I work with have a dad wound or they have some distrust in men, maybe based off of past traumas, romantically, sexually, etc. Right. And so that's part of what I really love to offer in this, and that I've done so much deep work too, is getting to hold space as a man and for them to start to feel safe, like, oh, actually men can hear my crying or my anger or my, whatever emotion, all my big emotion, so to speak, and not just run away and not scold me or not ignore me or anything like that. So it provides, so me as a man providing that mirror back is like a positive repatterning of those situations can also help too.
Beautiful. I'm curious just because you've touched on this kind of as an accidental through line, but how has your relationship with masculinity and your definition of it shifted?
Yeah, it's been through this journey, it's been really great because I think I was actually in some ways being over masculine in terms of like trying to do too much and trying to be in that way of like men can't show their emotions, they just have to be strong and like figure it out and figure everything out, and especially be strong in front of women and figure it out for that. Um, but yeah, what's been really helpful is actually cultivating my inner feminine has really created a lot of softness, and that's helped me from being really super rigid with things. And yeah, I think it just added a lot more softness, and so there's a lot less rigidness and contraction.
Beautiful. So, if someone's listening to this right now and they basically are having this realization that, oh my God, I've spent years earning love and attempting to find my way into the world, much like you and I have, what would you say would be a single first step to beginning to choose themselves? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, starting small, starting with something incrementally. Whether it's just making a weekend for yourself where you're not being productive, just being in quiet space, giving yourself a soaking bath, so to speak, could be something that's really good and powerful. Eventually working up to things like taking yourself on a trip, taking yourself on dates. Really, I mean, the self-love journey has been a long one for me, but giving yourself what you need, regardless, not depending on somebody else to give it to you, and not in a way of being hyper independent, but just giving yourself what you need, whether it's the space, the time to feel the emotions, the gifts, whatever your love language is, giving that to yourself.
Beautiful answer. What's something you've had to forgive yourself for
Oh
along
man,
your journey?
oh boy, so many. Yeah, I guess it's a really good and tough question. I'd say probably just for my clunkiness in dating, my awkwardness, especially in my 20s, you know, making all the mistakes. Um, yeah, I'd say that because there was definitely something where I felt like inadequate of like, oh, I should just know how to be a man in dates and how to ask a woman out and all these types of things. So, um, yeah, I'd say, yeah, forgiving myself for not knowing how to show up, right? Because there wasn't, anything really to teach me that I could know that was really a healthy way to do that.
Beautiful answer. And I'm glad that it comes back to having compassion for yourself ultimately, for not knowing what you didn't know.
Yeah, thank you. Well, us high achievers definitely forget to have compassion for ourselves, so which serves us in like achieving a lot, but at the cost of our own self worth, self love, burnout, all those things. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't see that.
Beautiful. So, where can people connect with you? And I know you're about to do some traveling, but what are you most excited for right now with your work?
Oh, mm. Yeah. Well, I'm in Minneapolis area, so I've been building more community. Um, yeah, providing safer spaces to connect with community, to have vulnerable conversations and make vulnerable requests. Um, yeah, I'd say, the traveling I'm really excited about as well. And yeah, you can find me at ryanspencecoaching.com and at ryanspencecoaching on Instagram. And yeah, after a couple year hiatus, I'm posting a lot more on social media. And so I guess that's another thing that I guess I'm excited about is finally like allowing myself to be visible and share more.
Okay, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm curious. What does it feel like for you now that you're opening yourself up to visibility? And what's the story maybe that you've had to work through with that?
I'd say it's feeling much better. I think for me, a little bit of the visibility was less about me being visible, but it was more about feeling the burnout of like, oh, I got to keep up with social media algorithms, and things. I guess some visibility was feeling like things need to be perfect and things need to be a certain way in order to post it. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to attract followers or clients and all that type of stuff. So, to that experience, things have been felt easeful and fun, and whatever I post is authentic. Same with my newsletter, etc., that I put out there. So it actually gets to be easy, and I don't have to be following a certain model or be this chameleon or be this perfect side of me to just show up.
Beautiful answer. So I always end the podcast with a quick fire round. So I want you to
Uh-huh.
think first word, first sentence that comes to
Mhm.
mind. But this should be fun. Are you ready for me?
I'm ready.
Okay, so a book that changed your life.
Attached.
That's a really good one. A word for your current season.
Restfulness.
Beautiful. A song that instantly lifts your mood.
I Feel Like Dancing by Jason Mraz.
One relationship lesson you wish you learned sooner.
Oh my gosh. All of them. But uh, all the lessons, so many. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say that, yeah, what I should have learned. Yeah, my needs and desires as a man are just as valid, right, as any others as a woman's.
Beautiful. Best advice you've ever received in a single sentence.
These are so good, hard hitting questions here. Best advice. Um, I mean, it sounds really simple, but it really does come down to just be yourself.
A thing you wish every woman knew about themselves.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'd say the, yeah, a woman's like vulnerability and softness is such a beautiful thing, such a gift for the masculine to get to witness and receive. You know, especially if he's in a healthy space and it can hold space for it. It's such a beautiful thing to witness, and it helps men feel really good to be able to hold that, and you know, even to help soften men too.
Beautiful. And lastly, what's one thing you want women to stop apologizing for?
Hmm. Man, I'd say, yeah, how they look. I mean, I find that women that feel comfortable with however they look, if they're in t-shirt and jeans or like whatever their look is, like do what makes you feel comfortable and authentic. That's usually what, from a male perspective, is attracted to women. It's like that's just feels more attractive too, is women that feel really comfortable with themselves.
Beautiful. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your openness and your honesty and sharing your heart with us today. And to everyone who's listening, thank you for choosing to spend your time here. I never take that for granted. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who can use this conversation. And if you haven't already, I'd be so grateful if you leave us a review. It truly helps more people find the show. Until next time, remember to be gentle with yourself, stay connected to yourself, and remember the relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship in your life. I'll see you in the next episode.